This is Robert Hiltachk, who was born May 2nd, 1938, served from 1956 to 1959 in the Navy. His highest rank was E5. We are recording on November 18th, 2015. I am the interviewer, Chase Jones. I am assisted by Sydney Scroggins, Amy Liao, and Riley Curry at Da Vinci Charter Academy. The interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. Where were you born?
Buffalo, Oklahoma.
What were your parents' occupation, number of siblings, and gender of your siblings?
My father was killed in 1940 when I was 2 years old. My mother remarried and my mother was pregnant with my sister when my father was killed. She remarried, and I have a half-brother, and my sister's deceased, and my mom and my stepdad are deceased also. My brother still lives in Oklahoma.
Okay, how old are you?
77.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Going to high school.
Do you have any other family members who served in the military?
Yes. My 3 cousins that lived in Woodland, all 3 were in the military. 1 in the Army, 2 in the Marine Corps. And my aunt raised 2 foster children. They were also in the Marine Corps.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
For which branch?
The U.S. Navy.
Why did you choose this specific branch?
Really, I don't know. I just always kind of thought that it would be nice to be in the Navy. I like their uniforms, I guess, and the fact that in the Navy they said they would move you around a lot, and I moved around a lot.
When did you depart for training?
On April the 20th, 1956, I went to San Diego for boot camp.
What were your thoughts when you entered the Navy?
That they'd teach me a trade, which they did, and I would have an opportunity to go see places that I had always read about and thought I'd like to see.
Did you have any specialized training?
Yes, they taught me how to be a jet mechanic.
So how was adapting to military life?
Pardon?
How was it adapting to military life? Like, describe the food, the barracks, your social life.
It was very different. Particularly in boot camp, where they get you up early in the morning so you can wait to have breakfast, and then run you hard all day and keep you up late at night, and stand a lot of watches, just teaching you how to obey orders and follow procedure.
What was the social life like?
Surprisingly, very well. We meet a lot of nice people and develop a lot of friendships. And
what was the hardest part of boot camp?
I think the lack of sleep. Seemed like they just kept us on the run all the time.
How was the food at boot camp?
Actually, not bad. I think that probably the Navy feeds better than the other branches of service because, no, the Air Force probably beats us, but in the Navy we have our own food with us on our ships. So,
do you have any interesting stories from boot camp?
From boot camp, no, not really. I was in boot camp. However you scored on your test as you went in is how they decided what you should do as far as leadership. And I was the athletic petty officer. And at that time I was 5 foot 7 inches tall and weighed 120 pounds. And why they thought I would make a good athletic PO, but our team did win first place in the rowing, so I guess I did well.
Where did you serve?
Well, after I got out of training in Memphis, I went or Millington, I should say, that's outside of Memphis. I got stationed at Moffett Field, California, which is down by Mountain View. And from there, we would periodically go to Fallon, Nevada, where they had a bombing range. And we'd rotate between Moffett and Fallon. And then in late 57, we went on board a carrier. I think, if I recall correctly, it was the Midway, for a 2-week shakedown cruise, teaching our pilots how to land on carriers and getting us adjusted so that to carrier life. And then we went back to Moffett, back to Fallon, and then back on board another ship, and I think that was the Hornet, also for 2 weeks. And then back to Moffett, and then we went from there to the USS Hancock, where we did an 8-month Far East cruise. First place we stopped was in Honolulu, and tied up at Ford Island, which is right across from Pearl Harbor. World War II, they say that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, but actually they bombed all the battleships were tied up at Ford Island. Ford Island is where the USS Arizona, the USS Utah are still there. The Oklahoma, the California, I think they were all bombed at that same location. Pearl Harbor was right across from Ford Island, and that's where the destroyers were. And they got a few of those too. And then at Hickam Air Force Base, I think they got a lot of those airplanes that never got off the ground. From there, I went to Yokosuka, Japan. And from Yokosuka, we got off the ship and took our airplanes and went up to Atsugi Naval Air Station. And while the ship was being replenished, we stayed at Atsugi and flew from there daily to keep their flight time up. They went back to the Hancock, and from there we went to Hong Kong and stayed there for a while, and then down to the Philippines at QB Point and stayed there for a while. We got off the ship at QB Point and practiced more flying. And as I said earlier, thinking back about QB Point, that's the only time in the Navy that I carried a weapon, and the reason we did that was because the runways were warm, and the snakes would crawl out at night and stay on the runway, so you had to have something to defend yourself with against them. And then from there we went to Okinawa. Okinawa was an interesting place, and I think we tied up at down in the bottom part of Japan, and from there I went over to Hiroshima to see the remnants of when they dropped the atomic bomb. They still hadn't rebuilt it, and there was still a lot of destruction in Japan that I observed while I was there.
Did anyone from boot camp go serve with you later on?
No.
Okay.
We all went several of us went to school in Norman, Oklahoma, and then from there to Memphis. And when you graduated from Memphis, or I'm saying Memphis, it's actually Millington, as your rating in the class, in other words, if you were number one in your class, you got your choice of a certain amount of billets that they put on the board. And I think I was number 8 or 10 in my class, and I chose Moffett Field. And some of the friends that I had gone through boot camp with, that was the only opening at Moffett, and I wanted to go to Moffett Field because it was close. My grandparents lived in Woodland, California. My aunt and uncle lived in Woodland, California, so I wanted to be here close to at least someone I might know, and so that's why I chose Moffett Field.
What actions were witnessed or duties away from the front line did you witness?
Pardon?
What actions did you witness or duties away from the front line?
I'm thinking it was probably around August of 1958, they started shooting from the mainland of China over to Quemoy and Matsu Island, and for the next 10 to 14 days we were on flight quarters with the idea that if it became necessary and we did go to war with China, we were ready.
Do you know about the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962?
Yes. The reason I know so much about that, I was still on inactive reserve duty and assigned to Alameda, and there was a chance that if things didn't get better, I was assigned to a blimp squadron. They were going to send it down to Guantanamo Bay. And fortunately for me, two things happened. My enlistment was up before it had to happen, and they didn't send them.
Did you ever serve on the front line?
No.
Okay. What kind of friendships were formed with your comrades?
I have a friend that lives in Seattle that I see periodically. We've been friends since 1957 when he got assigned to VA 153. I have another friend that lives in Kentucky that I email. He's unable to travel right now because he's in a wheelchair. And then I have a friend that lives in Placerville and one that lives in Willits, and we get together periodically.
Do you have any vivid battle moments?
Pardon?
Do you have any vivid battle moments? Like
No.
any memories of those?
No.
Okay. So you described how you stayed in touch, mostly email.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stay in touch with your family?
Pardon?
How do you stay in touch with your family during your service?
During service, mail. When you're on a carrier, they have a plane that is called the COD, Carrier On Board Delivery, and it brings in mail. And we usually got mail most of the time, at least every 10 days.
Did you ever feel homesick?
Yes.
So do you have any recreation or off-duty pursuits?
You mean now?
Yeah.
Well, nothing that comes to mind. About all I do now, I think, is play on my computer and read the mail and work out in the gym and try to keep up with my grandchildren.
So what'd you do when you were feeling homesick?
Write letters, and basically that was it.
Yeah, what would you do to make yourself less homesick?
Like I say, write, and periodically you could, as particularly if we were here in the States, I could call home and talk to them, so talk to my family. And
what did you do in your free time, if you had any?
well, it depends. I used to, on the weekends, I would leave Moffett and come up here to Woodland to visit with my aunt and uncle. My cousins were all the same age I were, and the one that had not gone in the service yet, he and I was about the same age, so we come up and do things that teenagers do, you know.
How did you interact with other soldiers?
I think we got along well. We had, like I say, we made a lot of good friends.
What were some things that you would bond over with the other soldiers?
Oh, discussions about home and what we planned to do when we got out of the service, and if we planned to go to college, where we planned to go, and what we planned to study, and those sort of things.
Did you have any rivals or tension with other soldiers during your service?
Oh, not that I can think of, no.
So you mentioned that you served in Japan. What was that like?
It was a very learning experience to see how war affects both people and the country. We really tore up Japan. I know they talk about the tragedy of dropping the atomic bomb, but we killed more people in Tokyo with napalm than they did with the nuclear bomb. The thing about the nuclear bomb was it terrified them, and that they finally gave up. But there was a lot of destruction that was hard to see.
You also talked about your service in Hong Kong. Can you give me a description about that?
At that time, the Hong Kong was governed by the British, and we were told that we could not get out of the city limits of Hong Kong because we would be over in China, and at that time we weren't friendly with China, and yet there was a lot of Russian spies and a lot of Chinese spies that we had to be very careful that what you said and different things.
So where were you when this war ended?
Which I was in the Cold War, so actually I think it just went on until Vietnam, really.
So what did you learn from your service?
Companionship and how to take orders and how to work on airplanes if I wanted to. In fact, when I got out, I went to college and studied aeronautics and didn't follow that line of occupation, but.
So you served during the Cold War, right?
Correct, yes.
So this war was kept pretty undercover. How did you feel about that?
Well, it seemed like it was kind of depressing, really, because when I got out, I wanted to join the American Legion, and they wouldn't let you join the American Legion because they said that we weren't in any kind of action, which kind of upset me, and that the ship I was on when we left Alameda, when we returned, we had lost 9 guys. I thought, well, you know, if we're still killing people, maybe it's, I thought that we should have the right to be in the American Legion. And I think that was, in my own idea, I think that's when we started not really caring about service people or veterans. I think that went on even through the Vietnam era, and it wasn't until, since after 9/11 that veterans started getting respect again.
So the fact that not many people knew of your efforts in the war, that made you kind of upset.
That's correct, yes.
So how did you return home? And where did you travel back from?
When I ended up back at Moffett Field, and when I got out of the Navy, I went back to Oklahoma, and I wasn't sure if I was going to stay there and I decided that I liked California better, so I came back and went to school and went to Sacramento City College in Sacramento. Met a gal and married her and settled down and worked in Sacramento.
How was the readjustment to civil life?
Actually, it was not difficult at all.
So how was living a normal life again? How was that?
Like I say, I seemed to adjust to it quite well. And then right shortly after I got out of the Navy, I started back to college, and so that kind of kept me busy for the next 2 years, and then in the meantime, I got a job at a fish company in Sacramento while I was my last year of school, and kind of fell in love with the things that I was doing. I found out that I liked selling, and so I got into sales and stayed there, became sales manager, and retired from there, and bought a fifth-wheel trailer and traveled the United States. I guess I kind of like to move around.
So how was the routine in the Navy different from your normal life?
Well, primarily the fact that when you were on duty, that meant you were on duty. You didn't go to, if they wanted you to stay up all night, you stayed up all night. Like I say, when we were at Quemoy and Matsu Island, when they were firing there, we went on flight quarters and we stayed up. We did not go back down to our compartment other than to shower and change clothes, and we did that for 14 days. And I stayed with my airplane probably 23 hours of the day. You get to go to lunch, go to dinner, and to breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and time to take a shower and periodically go to the bathroom. And other than that, you stayed with your airplane.
Did you see any routines that you had in the Navy carry over to your home life?
No.
Okay. So, how did you feel you were treated at home after serving in the war?
Really, wasn't bad. I don't think, like say they didn't. You just didn't bring it up. Let's say you just. And when I was going to City College, quite a few of the guys that were studying aeronautics, like had been in the military, so we all kind of stayed together, and it really didn't get bad until the '60s as far as the way they treated service people. I know that my cousin went to Vietnam, and when they came back, people would spit on them and call them baby killers, and it was terrible. And like I say, I don't think that ever got corrected until after 9/11. The Vietnam veterans really got the raw end of the stick.
So how did you stay in contact with the veterans over the years? Like, are you in any veteran groups?
Yeah, we have a veterans club that meets I live in Natomas at Heritage Park, which is a retirement community, and we have a military group that meets there, and I periodically, we go out to McClellan. They have a nice museum there, so I took some of my Navy stuff that I had and donated it to them, and I have some friends that work there, so I go visit with them, and then I go to the VA for medicine and things, so I keep in touch like that.
What life lessons do you think you took away from your service?
I think that it probably grew me up and made me have a lot of respect for my country. It teaches you a lot about patriotism. I fly my flag every day. And I think that's probably things that I learned from the military, a respect for our country.
If you could go back to when you were 17, would you change how you did this?
No, I think I would do probably the same as I did before. In fact, I probably, if I could do it all over again, I often thought I should have stayed in the Navy. I think I liked it that much. I should have gone back, but I decided, I got married, and it would have been a lot easier to be married if you didn't have to travel.
What was the different range of people like that you would meet in the Navy?
There was all kinds of people. It was, if I recall correctly, in boot camp, it started off, the first thing we talked about was how many years you had to do. And if you met someone who had signed up for 6 years, you knew that they had signed up because a judge somewhere had told them you can either go to the military or go to jail. And so, because in the 50s and 60s, that's the way a lot of, particularly teenagers who would get into trouble, judges would give them a choice to go into the military or go into prison. And a lot of them would take the military, which taught them a trade and how to behave.
Do you have any interesting stories from your service or any funny moments?
I have some terrifying moments. We was on board, I think we were off the coast of Japan, and I was in bed asleep, and they sounded the collision alarm and turned the lights on, and the compartment was filled with smoke. And so I jumped out of bed, and I didn't have I had on my underwear. I ran to the flight deck, up to the hangar deck, because I thought we were going to abandon ship. And they had made a mistake and said we was going to abandon ship. And we looked up on the forward part of the ship, and it was on fire. A plane had tipped forward and the propeller hit the deck and broke the engine loose and caught the catapult on fire and caught the fuel cell on fire on that part, and the ship naturally had to stop, and we lost a couple of guys that had jumped off the edge that were on fire. We never did find them, and I think that's probably that. And when they told us that when they started shooting from China over to Quemoy and Matsu Island, and we didn't know if we were going to go to war, that was kind of frightening too. I think those are two things that stick out in my mind the most.
Do these years in the Navy seem longer than past years in your life?
Pardon?
Do the years in the Navy seem like longer years?
Well, at the time they seemed like forever, but yeah, looking back on it, it was actually moved quite fast.
What were your highlights during your service?
I think probably going to Japan and Okinawa, traveling, seeing the world.
What were your down moments during your service?
Being away from home, being homesick, and trying to deal with that.
So you briefly talked to us about Lee Harvey Oswald. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I don't know for sure if what I'm telling you is true, but I read that Lee Harvey Oswald was at Atsugi Naval Air Station in 1958 and worked on the U-2, which was a spy plane. Later, I heard a rumor that when Powers got shot down over Russia flying a U-2, that there was a possibility that Oswald who was in Russia at that time, gave them some information which enabled Russia to shoot him down, because U-2s they thought were indestructible and that nobody could find them and shoot them down. But unfortunately, that wasn't true.
So you didn't have any relationship with him?
No. I might have, if he was there, I would have had a meal with him, because we would have had to have come in contact sometime. As to did I know him? No. He was a Marine and I was in the Navy. And the Marines and the Navies didn't really get along well.
What did you think about him shooting JFK?
It was very shocking. I've been to the Texas Book Depository to see where he shot from, and it's almost, if you believe in conspiracies, it's almost impossible to believe that he could shoot two people with a bolt-action gun like he used and hit, but I guess they can't prove that he didn't do it, so I think the whole country was in shock that it had happened.
Did you lose any people that you were close with in the Navy during your service?
No.
Did you lose any of them to war?
No, not while I was in the Navy. I had a step-uncle that was killed in World War II. I had a cousin who was shot in Vietnam, and then I had another cousin who got Agent Orange poisoning from Vietnam, and he died of cancer several years ago.
So, did you have any injuries come to you through anything in the Navy?
No.
What would you say the average amount of sleep you would be getting a night would be?
Well, probably 50% of the time you could get 8 hours, but the other time, particularly if we were in flight quarters or boot camp, if you got 4 hours of sleep a night, that was about average 4 to 6. But most of the time, particularly if you were at Moffett Field or in Fallon, we'd get 8 hours. We'd usually work a 8 or 10 hour day. A lot of times we do night ops. Night ops would usually end at 10:30.
So you said you were young when you joined. You said you were 17. What kept you up, and did anything bother you?
Offhand, I can't think of anything other than, like I say, required stood a lot of watches and things like that that kept us up. But
What was the thing you remember most about serving in the Navy?
The destruction that was done to Japan. Met a lot of nice guys that I liked and kept friendship with, and I think it grew me up. I hope and pray that it made me a better person and gave me a sort of a, I guess, a love for my country.
Did you finish high school before you went?
Yes, I did. In Oklahoma, we graduated in early May, and I talked with the superintendent, and they let me graduate 2 weeks early, and so I could go in before I turned 18. As I said earlier, if you went in before you turned 18, they let you out the day before you were 21. So I thought, well, if I got in early, I could get my military service done, because in those days they did the draft, and I could get it done in 3 years and still go in the Navy.
Was your family in support of you joining this or joining
Yes,
the Navy?
they had to be, because my mother had to sign for me to be able to go. Either that or she wanted to get rid of me, I'm not sure.
What was the emotion in your family when you were leaving?
Oh, I think my mother cried a lot. And I think she knew that she wanted me to be able to think for myself, and I think that's why she signed for me to go. I think she would have probably been happier if I'd have stayed home and gone to school.
What was the closest that you believe you came to combat?
Probably when Quemoy and Matsu Island, when they were shooting it, we were prepared to fight China if it came down to that. And in the military, rumors or they call it scuttlebutt goes on all the time. And we were pretty sure that we're going to go to war with China, and that was kind of a frightening experience. Here we are, right off the coast of China, and we didn't know for sure, and nobody told you anything. They just kept you up all night and kept you on flight quarters, and that was the only time I had a Marine with a weapon stand beside my airplane, because it had a nuclear shape on it.
How were the emotions of the other soldiers?
I think they were all like me. We were to say we weren't concerned would be foolish. And then they told us too that I don't know if you're familiar with the way that the military works, but the Marines are the only ones who can go. If you have to put boots on the ground, as they say now, it has to be a Marine. If you're in the Navy and they can put you in a Marine uniform and send you in as a Marine, because the Marines is a part of the Navy. And so they told us also, while we were doing this little thing with Quemoy and Matsu, that there was a chance that we would do a landing, and if so, some of us would be issued Marine uniforms and we would be going ashore. As to that didn't happen, and if that might not be fact too, but that's what we were told.
What do you think you avoided that conflict?
Pardon?
What do you think avoided that war starting, the conflict between?
I think because of the fact that we showed up with our carriers, and I think that China felt that they didn't really want us to attack, because I think at that time we had a lot more powerful weapons than they did. I think they probably caught up with us, but at that time I think they were afraid of the fact that we would drop an A-bomb on them too. So as to if I know that to be fact, I don't, but I'm sure that it might have played in their mind.
What weapons were you had? What kind of weapons did you have?
We had 500-pound bombs, we had nuclear bombs, we had twin 40s, we had I worked on an A4D, which is small, what they call a mosquito bomber. And it was capable of dropping an A bomb or 500 pounders, or we had a pod that you could hang on it that was a Gatling gun, and you know what a Gatling gun is? It has 8 guns that go around in a circle, and it does continuous fire, and that's for strafing. And we had all of that stuff we put in like I say, we loaded up all those weapons when Quemoy and Matsu was being fired on, and we were prepared. If they decided if the president had said go, we were ready.
What was the caliber of those Gatling guns?
I think they're all 20 millimeters. I know that that A4s have two 20 millimeters on either side, and I believe that they were too.
Do you ever wish you could have enjoyed your teen years more instead of going into the Navy right off the bat of high school?
No, I don't think so.
So, what made you think Navy, just when you're 17, thinking Navy, not Army, not Marines?
I think probably commercials and when you're young, you can be led down the path a little bit, I think. And they showed pictures of guys playing guitars and singing around in groups, and you were on a ship, and everything looked wonderful, and you don't realize that it's a job too. You know, it's not all fun.
So that was some strong propaganda that got you?
Yeah.
What was the biggest part of propaganda that you remember? Like,
Pardon?
What was the main propaganda that you remember?
About the see the world, get out, and that you get this idea that if you join with your friends, you could stay with your friends all the way through. That didn't work. And I met, when I left Oklahoma, I went with 2 other guys, and the last time I saw them was when we left Millington, Tennessee. One of them went to Florida, and I don't know where the other one went.
Were the commercials anything like your actual experience?
Well, no. But I guess, yes, we did have some enjoyable times.
Did anyone have musical instruments like a guitar or anything like that?
No.
So we talked about the food at boot camp, and you said it wasn't that bad. How was the food when you were on the ship?
Well, again, this Quemoy and Matsu thing, normally we would stay at sea only 25 to 30 days, and then we'd pull into port to replenish. Well, we stayed 65 days at sea, and we ran out of food. They we finally caught up with a supply ship, but before we got the supply ship there, we were down to eating ice cream because we had an abundance of that, and a few other odds and ends of things, but we got our first really good meal once we got replenished. And being typical military people with a smart mind, we made sure that when we were unloading the food off of that supply ship, that we had some of our people there, and we would take a few cans of stuff and move it down and put it in our flight. So we had a lot of fruit cocktail, and we had a lot of Spam, which is another nice thing to get this. But we never ran out of food again.
Did you notice an increased attention to Vietnam compared to the Cold War?
I guess no.
So you said Spam. Did you enjoy Spam?
Well, when you don't have anything else, yes. In fact, I still like Spam. I really don't care too much for fruit cocktail because we ate a lot of that too. And I think when I was in Hawaii, we got to eat a lot of pineapple juice, a lot of pineapple and pineapple juice. I kind of got to where I didn't really care for that either.
What were some of your meals, like your most enjoyable meals?
Most of the time it was basics. They fed us fairly well. We had, they always, back in those days, the Catholics were supposed to eat fish on Friday, so we always had some sort of a seafood item on Friday. Periodically, we would have steak, pork. They fed us fairly well.
So, can you describe the ships you were on, like the size of the ship, the amount of living space you had to yourself?
I was on a Essex class carrier. I think the overall length of it was a little over 900 feet, and it's roughly 100 feet wide. We had an angled deck on it. We had, I think, 85 airplanes of different sizes. We had some A3Ds. A3Ds are a big bomber. They were too big to put on to the hangar deck, and it was big enough that you could play football on it, and the ball wouldn't go off the edge. So some of the things I remember doing to keep ourselves entertained while we were out to sea, I don't know if you know these little remote airplanes that you could build from a kit. Well, we made little remote airplanes, worked all week on them, building them, put a big tail on the back of it, lit it on fire, and flew it off the ship at night so we could watch it go out and fly and then eventually crash into the ocean.
So that's how you guys had fun. You played.
That's how we had fun.
You built some
They
planes.
had the Navy had a thing at sea. They had something called Rope Yard Sunday, which meant that you could do anything you wanted that day. Get crazy, So that's how we relieved stress. And some of the things we did was we would play ball, and because, like I say, carrier's big enough, you can have a ball game. We built little airplanes, and a lot of us just slept or wrote letters home or.
How would they
anything to
get the
entertain us.
letters when you were out at sea? How would they get them to you?
Pardon?
How would they get the letters to you if someone
On carriers, they have a plane that comes in about every week to 10 days called the COD, Carrier On Board Delivery. They would bring us our mail, and then if you had some people that were coming in, or if someone had to go home on emergency leave, they would fly out with them. It was our way of keeping up with the world.
Okay, and what was the name of your carrier?
USS Hancock, CVA 19. It was a World War II carrier. It had, in 45, two kamikazes, two different times, kamikazes came down and went through the hangar, through the flight deck and exploded on the hangar deck.
Do you have any reflections on your service?
Yeah, I think I look back on it. I think at the time I thought, well, I needed to get out, that I'd had enough of it, but I had a lot of fun. It was a learning and growing experience, something that I don't regret ever doing. And it got me to California and out of Oklahoma, so I guess that's a good thing.
So you said you really enjoyed this and that you almost wish you'd stayed in for a little bit longer. Would you suggest it for someone who is our age?
If you can learn to obey people telling you what to do, if that doesn't bother you, yeah, it's a good. The nice thing about it is when you get 20 years, which moves awfully fast, you got a nice paycheck for the rest of your life. There are a lot of benefits to it. There's a lot of drawbacks too. If you don't, you got to be away from home, and it depends. The Air Force, I think those people get in and they might stay on the same base for 20 years, but the Navy seems to like to move you around a lot, as you can see by different places I've been, that seem like we moved every 3 months, a minimum of every 3 months.
Is there anything else you would like to share before we conclude this interview?
Well, I think now that I'm very pleased that our country finally has got around to where vets aren't looked down on. I think what started all of this at the end of the Korean War, a lot of the people who served in World War II thought that we lost the war in Korea. Well, we didn't lose the war in Korea. It was never a war. It was a police action. They started off trying to get the North Koreans across the 38th parallel. And so after we killed a lot of people and accomplished really nothing, and so I think the World War II guys thought, well, the guys in Korea lost the war. Well, they didn't lose the war. The politicians lost the war for us. So then fast forward to Vietnam, and here again, we went off to a war that with no goal. Now in World War II, we were attacked, so we figured we had to retaliate. We weren't attacked in Vietnam, and I'm not anti-war. I don't know whether it was good or bad, but the way the country treated the veterans who came home from Vietnam was a disgrace. I think that we've overcome that. I think now that it's when those guys coming home from Vietnam had to take their uniforms off because they were humiliated. That was wrong. We were drafting people during the Vietnam War. We don't draft anymore. Those people, a lot of those guys that went to Vietnam didn't go there by choice. They went there because they were drafted and they were told to do that. And it was wrong not to support them. And that's my opinion. But I am proud of the way that they're handled now. This last Veterans Day, they had a lot of nice activities in Sacramento that made you proud to be a veteran. And for the first time in the last couple of years, if you wear your hat that says Navy, people come up and say thank you for your service. That never happened when I was in. In fact, while I was in, I got ran off the road by 3 guys. I was in uniform. They broke my nose, knocked out my teeth, and blacked my eyes because they didn't like military people. That didn't sit too well with me.
I want to thank you very, very much for coming in and having this interview with us. I enjoyed it immensely. Thank you, Mr. Hiltachk.
And thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
Very eye-opening experience for myself.
Thank you.